All right. All right. Couples on steroids. Let's go.
Yeah. So we had, we basically had the 90-minute session. They showed up. The first session was with the female partner. So we
This is
went in.
a first session.
This is like the
30.
90-minute session. Yeah.
Got it.
So I went through, like I always do, the questionnaire in the first session just because I find it super helpful. So she was basically able to relate that she felt like she wanted to come there because it was like the last straw in their relationship. But more like she was the one who was kind of saying, hey, this is the last straw. Like, if you don't agree to come to this. So right away, I knew obviously what that was about. So essentially, like, there was a few issues that came up. She wasn't the best at, like, you could tell she was nervous, and she wasn't great at articulating the issues. But originally, like on the intake, it was talking about like there was addiction problems and that type of thing, right? But once we started getting into it, like the biggest issues in the relationship question, she essentially said, oh, so he's been unfaithful, but unfaithful like more in like an online sense, like so they've been together 5 years. 2 years into the relationship was the first time I guess she caught him messaging girls from high school. Didn't really elaborate on the content of the messages. I could just tell she felt obviously it was inappropriate or she wouldn't have brought it up. And then recently, within the past, I think it was 6 months, she had caught him again, only this time he was like visiting pornography sites. I think she said there was like video chats and things like that. So basically she was uncomfortable with that. She was upset. And she then started to basically say, like, what I want to do is find out like what's going on, A, and B, like find out like if this is the result of his addiction. So I think she's already like, I got the sense she was already trying to like excuse his behavior. Hopefully we find out he's addicted to things and that's what's making him do this essentially, right? So, and her goal was
we do live in a medical model, and that's how a lot of people are brought up, that hey, if we can diagnose it, then we have a shortcut here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you could tell that's ultimately what I think she essentially wanted to hear, right? Because then it takes like, then it's like, oh, hey, it's these things that he's addicted to driving it. It's not me, right? She's, in a sense, she doesn't have to feel like she's responsible or doesn't have to feel bad about herself and wonder. Because
hey, you know what? It's an understandable rationalization, because then it means that it's not us, right?
Yeah.
And
it's this outside thing that
he didn't cheat on me. He didn't cheat on me.
Yeah.
He's sick.
Yeah. Yeah. The drugs or the beer made him do it, kind of thing, was essentially what I kind of got from her. So hers was good. We were able to talk. I got her to expand somewhat on each question. Her affect was, she was quite like quiet and kind of like withdrawn a little bit. So it was a little bit more difficult than I've noticed than the other couple I'd had. So that was fine. We did that individual session with her. Then I brought the gentleman in, and we did just the individual questionnaire with him. And he was really difficult, and not difficult in the sense he wasn't trying to be difficult at all. And he wasn't being difficult. It was just difficult for me because he was really unable to provide any insights, anything over like maybe 1 or 2 word answers were really tough for him. He kind of off the bat had said like, I've just always been really bad at like talking. I don't really, think about this or talk about anything, like, and he's like, it's been in every area of my life, right? And then to coincide, one of her complaints as well, I should have prefaced this, was the fact that she's like, I can never get like any 2 words out of him about anything other than just like, did you take the garbage out, and like, why didn't you do the dishes, kind of thing, right? So it was real slow going with him. I did the
well, let me just quickly say, why does he have to? She does all the work for him.
Yeah, well, that's a good point as well, right? Yeah. So the questionnaire with him was tough, just because, like I said, I was trying to get him to expand on it. I think I'm usually struggling to fit that questionnaire in half an hour. With him, like, I was struggling to extend it past 10 or 15 minutes, right? Like, I'm trying to get him to expand on things. It was really difficult, admittedly difficult, right? And he just didn't know. And he wasn't being, I didn't get the sense he was being combative or he was being standoffish. One of the questions that we actually got to is the question that I always love of like, do you think that this process will work? And then what's your motivation level, right? So the fact he said the priest doesn't believe in the process, doesn't believe in counseling or anything, which I was like, well, that makes sense as to why you're probably not very chatty right now. But then assessed his motivation at 10 in terms of like, he just basically said, and I was like, kind of like, explain that 10, right? Like, why so motivated? And he basically just said like, oh, I just want to make the relationship good and make her happy, which interesting again, right? So I brought them both back in together.
So classical withdrawer from him. She is a pursuer, but she's a pursuer that's been burnt, right, with the cheating, and so she's kind of quieter because of that.
Well, and it was interesting, and this is what I struggled with as well, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up with you, was it started out pretty slow, and like what I like to do is if I can't seem to like get grounds for an enactment going, or I can't get them to share, or it's slow going there, then I pivot back and explain the process, right? Explain a bit about the dance, explain like, how they're caught in basically the same cycle. And it's really about us trying to understand the cycle, understand each other's experiences, and then create.
So is that what you felt? Is that it was hard to get them underneath? I know there's only half an hour in that first session, and then you went to psychoed because of that.
Yeah, so I felt, well, it wasn't necessarily that I opened with psychoed just because they had no idea how couples therapy worked. So I felt like just giving them a brief, and they both seemed quite tense too. Plus the room was really hot. They both seemed quite tense. So I kind of gave them a little bit at the beginning, just was hoping it would relax them. Right. So then basically we'd kind of started, and I'd got them to, who would like to start? Why don't we talk about why we're here today? Like some of the issues that we feel are in this relationship. And I was expecting that the female partner would essentially say, hey, like this happened. I've been worried about his infidelity. Like he has problems with, substances. But it was
like to continue what she did in the individual part.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of, and especially with her saying, I really want like his insights into this. I assume she would put it out there and then basically expect me to try to like help him unpack what's going on for him, right? But it was weird because, well, it wasn't weird. It just was weird to me and not what I was expecting. But essentially what she did is she then went off about like a problem that they'd had with their family. Like, so I guess what had happened was they're currently renting a house off.
Hold on, before you get to that, what does that tell you?
Well, that she doesn't want to bring up what the actual problems are. It sounds like that
she's scared to lose him, and when it comes to the two of them in the room together, she's not comfortable labeling the problem in the same way that she does to herself and to you when you're just the two of you there.
Yeah, and that was interesting to me too, and that's kind of what I got to as well. But it threw me a little bit because you always ask at the end, like, is there anything that you don't want me to share, like in the room with both of you? And they were both, oh no, that's fine. Like anything that we talked about, it's not a big deal. Yeah, so that kind of threw me, and then like I was like, okay, there's still a really good opportunity for an enactment here, right? Like, because this is a conflict that they experience. It doesn't matter that it's not the reason that they came in. This is a great opportunity. So we basically start walking through the conflict. It was related to the fact that they're renting this house, and the mother came over, and there was a misunderstanding, and she ended up yelling at the son, and her got into it. And then the son's brother, one of the clients, the male partner's brother, came over and then basically reamed both of them out for like getting into it with mom type of thing. But then essentially what happened was then the client's brother then kind of, I guess the male client withdrew a bit from the argument. It was kind of like, hey, it's done. But then the female partner kind of kept going at the brother, and then they kind of got into a bit of an argument. And I was like, well, that sounds like it's got to be really difficult. Like you're probably feeling like, hey, like I'm, just over here doing my thing, and next thing I've got people yelling at me. Maybe there's a little bit there in terms of like, why wasn't this something we were dealing with together? You're feeling alone. You're feeling like, trapped with this person now attacking you. And she, you know, she had agreed with all that. And she was like, essentially, that's what I was feeling, right? Like, I felt like, why isn't he bothering to stand up for me? Like, you know, and then I go and try to engage the male partner, and was basically like, you know, what's it like to hear that? Like, is there anything that maybe, you know, do you see that differently? Like, what's it like to hear her talk like that and share those feelings with you? And he like, yeah, he was just really, he couldn't really articulate anything. I felt like I almost stopped mid like trying to do this enactment, because I felt like I got to a point where I'm pretty sure I was coaching him, almost like in a sense of being like, wow, that must, you know, like trying to be empathetic, like, and go a little bit deeper. But then he's just almost like agreeing with everything that I was saying. And in my head, I'm like, I'm not this good at this. There's no way, like, this is everything you're feeling, right?
Yeah.
So, and the rest of the session
Well,
was
it sounds like his sort of mind or cognitions were engaged, but not necessarily his experience, right?
yeah,
Maybe not necessarily because you weren't engaging them or trying to, but more because he's just not comfortable to show that in front of her.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
But
the
you can
rest
call
of
that out. Yeah.
yeah, and the rest, and I tried that as well. Like I said, hey, this is like probably a really intimidating feeling in a lot of ways, right? Like, you mentioned that you weren't really comfortable with counseling to begin with, and now here you are, right? And I even tried to bolster him a bit, and I was like, you know, in the individual session, like, I respect that you said that, and that your motivation level was a 10. And then she interjects and goes, your motivation, how can you say your motivation level is a 10 if you don't believe in counseling? And I was like, well, let's slow that down for a second. I was like, why don't we look at that in a bit of a different way? The fact that he doesn't believe in a process, yet he's still motivated to engage in it because it's something that he feels may benefit the both of you, and it's something that you wanted him to do as well. But I felt like I was just lost about, yeah, by the last 10 minutes of the session, like, I felt like I was struggling. So I guess my main
I mean,
question is
just yeah, for that last part, he's here because of you.
yeah,
Is that right? And checking with them, like that's what
yeah,
brings him here. So
yeah,
despite not understanding or believing in it, well, you can't believe in something you don't understand, but that's fine because he hasn't experienced it yet, right? So but the fact is he's here despite not believing in counseling or
yeah,
whatever he knows about couples counseling so far.
yeah,
And he's here for you, right? Like, so, but it's not necessarily you trying to convince her, it's more just like, let me now go back to him and work with him.
yeah, yeah. And I felt that there was some good points, but yeah, it was so different from the first couple that I've worked with, because they were so like, they're dynamic, and they're both like, it was great in a sense, because the fight's like right in the room. Like, you don't even have to go back to last week. It's currently happening right in front of you.
Yeah.
With this
Yeah.
couple, it was a lot, like, as you mentioned, it was a lot more top down. She was very like bottom up, emotionally engaged, but I struggled immensely with him. I felt
With
like,
him. And in the same way, like you said, he struggles with that. He's aware that he
yeah,
struggles with that in this relationship and other relationships. She's struggling with him to open up, right? But what you would do that she wouldn't do in a good world and in a EFT world is you give him the space, right? And you, despite feeling like you have to go top down, you even more so double down on the bottom up.
mhm,
Right. So that could include validating it, but ultimately everything has to come from him. And what comes from you is the tracking. It's the reflections, right? It's the conjectures, right? And conjectures and all that stuff. The purpose of it is not to have him. They're not closed-ended questions, right? They're not yes or no. You're
yeah,
not trying to get a, oh yeah. You're trying to elicit emotion from him, primary emotions.
yeah,
Right. And in clients where that's difficult, like you can bring that up in the room. Like you could have used the last piece where she goes, how could you, right? Just that, how could you say, what's that like to hear that she's challenging what you're saying,
mhm,
that there's no possible way that you could be wanting to be here 100% despite not believing in the process. Like, what's that like? Like, what comes over you right now as she said that? So just like go zooming. So it's like either you have your story of the week or you look for these moments like as opportunities, like, especially when you're having a hard time, that would have been a good one, because that's like a little jab, right?
Yeah.
And that's like her.
I was trying to do that every which way. Like he was just, I've
Yeah.
never, yeah, it got me.
Yeah. So
It got me
let's do
shook.
a
It
quick
got me
little like
scared.
2 minute role play. Let's do a quick little. So you be him, I be you. Okay. So just give me an example of like something that was difficult for you
So
as him.
kind of exactly what you said when she's sharing something, and you basically turning to him and saying like, "What's that like for you? What's it like to hear her say that? What's it like?"
And you be him now.
Okay.
What would he say?
Like he would sit there in silence for probably 15-20 seconds and would just go, I just don't know.
So I would throw out a conjecture there. So you just don't know what to do. You want so badly to like say the right thing and get it right by her, but you just, you don't know what to do. Is that right? And like, so it's a conjecture in that it assumes, and not really assume, because you kind of know that he wants to make her happy, right? Like that's his goal. I want to make her happy. It's like, no matter what you do, you try these different things, you can't get it right. So you try to let him acknowledge that that's true. And then you watch for the nonverbals. Is it landing? Is it bringing him down, or is it engaging his mind?
Yeah.
If you're noticing something, then you can just reflect back what you're noticing. It doesn't matter if he's labeling what he's feeling. What matters is that he's experiencing it.
Yeah.
So you can throw out things that you would think that other withdrawers would be feeling. Like, this must be like right now, as you sit here, you are so badly, when you try to do the right thing, you try to say the right thing and you just can't get it right. Is it like you're telling yourself that you're a failure? So you kind of connect to the perception, like you're failing her. Connect it always to her. Always use attachment if you can. Yeah, it's like that. So what's that like to think you're failing her? Right? It's like, I imagine with this person that you love so much, you want to make her happy, and ultimately you think you're failing her. And when she'll say these things to you, like these things that you're not good enough or whatever, and what's that like? And let him sit with it, and get to overwhelming, get to sadness, get to these kinds of things. And if you see it, just throw it out there. And if not, if you really don't see it, you don't see any like getting underneath it, throw yourself into it. Hey, if it was my partner that I love as much as you love her, right? And I was telling myself, that I would feel so sad.
Okay.
I'd feel so heartbroken.
That would have been helpful to know ahead of time.
That's
a perfect out,
men,
actually.
especially.
Yeah.
With men especially, it's like the perfect invitation, because you've got another man that's owning his emotions, that it's okay to feel what it is you're experiencing.
Yeah.
And it might be different, but it's still permission to drop down.
Yeah. Okay. That is super helpful, because I was, like I said, at one point, you know what, if I would have done it, and because when I said I was coaching him, I was going through what I thought he would be feeling, and it was from what I was feeling. So if I would have just added that and prefaced that, it would have been a total okay.
Yeah.
That's huge.
A lot of it is that, but also like just your tone, like really slowing down, really concise, always kind of say less. A good rule of thumb, less than what they're saying. So like if they're only giving you a little bit, you also just keep it really simple, really concise.
Yeah.
Really slow, like exaggerate almost the emotional words, elongate it, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Even enact the feeling that you're going for in him. Right? Withdrawers can only feel so much, right? It's like a lot of it is like they cope with going cognitive and fixing, but experientially they're overwhelmed. When they're shut down, they're just really overwhelmed, right? And they're just like really sad that they can't meet the needs that their partner is having, right? Yeah. And that's it. Yeah. And they're hurt when they're jabbed. They're hurt, right? They're hurt. They're hurt because their intention and what ends up happening, as far as like their intention, like when they're jabbed, criticized, they're hurt because it goes so against what they're trying to do. It's like, oh, And so then they end up feeling like they have to close off in order to protect themselves.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's really
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you, Ofir.
Yeah. And you know, when you're struggling too, it's okay to just switch over and say, hey, you know, pursuer, what's it like to see him struggling this much? He's working so hard to connect to his emotions, but he's having such a hard time. You know, what's that like to see him struggling this much?
Yeah.
Even if it's taking more than 10 minutes, it's obviously a struggle that he wants to. Maybe he even says he wants to, just can't connect. What's that like to see him trying this hard? Sometimes whatever the response is there could be really encouraging, because if she says, you know what, I've never seen him work this hard to get there, and he sees that and said, what's that like to hear that from her? Like that this, you're on the right path, essentially. She wants more of this. Sometimes it's just that permission, that reassurance that this direction's okay, because it's not so much generally that they don't have the language or the awareness of what they're feeling, it's the safety. So for withdrawers, we're building in safety.
Okay.
Some don't have the words for sure, but they do have the experience. They know what they're feeling, right? As long as they're feeling safe, they will allow themselves to feel that. I bet you when they're on their own and their partner's not there, they can feel these things. They're not blind to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to go though. Thank you for your help.
Yeah. Yeah. My pleasure. Anytime.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you, Ofir.
Have a good one. Enjoy. Yeah. Have a good one. Take care.